Welcome to today's Explainer. Now, right up front, I need to warn you, we are breaking down a deeply chilling case today. We're looking at a narrative where a desperate call for help just came too late. And the investigation that followed, well, it revealed a truth far darker than anyone involved could have possibly anticipated. It's a story about a missing girl, a terrifying midnight plea, and a Chicago detective named Ryan Cole who realized way too late that the monster he was hunting was actually hiding right inside his own investigation. So the horror really kicks off with a single voicemail. It was left at exactly 2:13 a.m. on Detective Ryan Cole's phone. Imagine waking up to this, a terrified, whispering female voice delivering this exact plea. And right after she breathes the word police, there's this loud, echoing, metallic bang. And then, dead silence. The caller was a 23-year-old woman named Emily Carter. Look at how insanely tight this timeline is. Emily was just a quiet girl who worked night shifts at a highway diner. Now, 3 days before that voicemail, neighbors actually reported hearing screams coming from her place. But tragically, the police largely ignored it. The only guy who paid any attention was Detective Cole. Once that voicemail hit, the clock was ticking incredibly fast. Just 30 minutes, literally half an hour after that 2:13 a.m. call, Emily had completely vanished. When Detective Cole finally gets into Emily's apartment, it wasn't some sterile, empty scene. He walked into an interrupted life. The television was still running, there was a cup of coffee sitting there, totally untouched. Over by the kitchen sink, he found a small amount of blood, which right away confirms she absolutely did not leave willingly. But the most glaring clue was sitting right on the table, a framed photograph, just completely shattered. Now, the damage to that photograph, it definitely wasn't an accident from a struggle. Someone had deliberately and violently scratched out one specific face. And that face belonged to Emily's boyfriend, Daniel Reeves. Obviously, in cases like this, significant others are always the very first people you look at, right? But finding physical defacement like this, it immediately threw Daniel right into the hot seat as the undeniable prime suspect. When questioned, Daniel swore up and down he hadn't seen Emily for days. He was incredibly nervous, insisting she'd been acting super paranoid lately about being followed. But Ryan Cole is a detective who looks for proof, and the physical evidence was telling a vastly different story. Daniel had these fresh scratches on his wrist. And even more damning, under the passenger seat of his car, Ryan spotted this very specific dark red mud. It's the kind of mud you literally only find near Blackwater Creek, which is just outside the city limits. So the very next morning, police are scouring the Blackwater Creek area. Sadly, they didn't find Emily, but they did find her phone, completely buried in that red mud. The screen was shattered to pieces, but by some miracle, a single audio file survived. When Ryan hit play, his blood ran cold. He heard Emily crying, followed by this chillingly calm male voice saying, "You should have stayed quiet." And the craziest part? Ryan completely froze because he recognized the voice. Recognizing that voice completely derailed the entire investigation. It drove Ryan absolutely crazy, to the point where he just kept replaying that initial 2:13 a.m. voicemail over and over again that night. Check the basement. Okay, but whose basement? Emily's apartment didn't even have one. And then it finally clicked. A terrifying realization. Emily worked at this old roadside diner out by the highway, and that entire building was constructed directly over a massive storage basement. So Ryan rushes out to that diner alone, right at midnight. The second he gets down there, he's hit by this horrible, rotten smell coming from these leaking old pipes. As his flashlight sweeps through the darkness, it lands on an absolute nightmare. Stuffed inside these heavy garbage bags were dozens of women's handbags, and right next to them, meticulously stacked, were driver's licenses. Ryan hadn't just found a clue, he had literally stumbled straight into a serial killer's trophy room. 6. The crushing weight of that number hit Ryan like a freight train. You see, the driver's licenses hidden down there didn't just belong to a few random women. They belonged to missing women whose cold cases stretched back 6 entire years. We are talking about a long-term, highly calculated, incredibly successful operation here. Seeing this, Ryan immediately grabs his radio to call for backup. But he doesn't get to wait for that backup. Before he can even make it to the bottom of the stairs, the heavy basement door violently slams shut, locking him inside. Above him, he hears these slow, deliberate footsteps echoing on the floorboards. Then, a voice calls down into the dark. It's the exact same male voice from Emily's buried phone, saying, You were never supposed to find this. The man standing at the top of those stairs, the serial killer responsible for all of this, is Detective Mark Sullivan, Ryan's own partner. Mark had worked missing persons cases for years, which gave him absolute control over the evidence, the police reports, the crime scenes, all of it. He was intentionally choosing victims that he knew nobody would come looking for. And Emily Carter? She was only targeted because she happened to see Mark at the diner with another missing woman and actually figured it out. Suddenly, the basement lights just cut out. Pitch black. A gunshot explodes through the dark as Mark starts actively hunting Ryan through these old, dusty shelves. Mark is just calmly walking down the stairs with a flashlight, boasting. He says, "Nobody ever suspects the cop. They trusted me. Every single one." But Ryan uses the darkness to his advantage. As Mark's flashlight beam sweeps near him, Ryan swings this heavy, rusted pipe with everything he has, dropping Mark to the floor. Ryan sprints up the stairs to get out of there, but by the time he crashes out into the street, Mark's police cruiser is already gone. Internal Affairs launched an investigation immediately, obviously. But Mark? He vanished into thin air. No bank activity, no phone records, nothing. Then, 3 days later, a package shows up at Ryan's apartment. Inside is a burner phone. The only thing on it is a voicemail from Mark, with someone screaming in the background, giving coordinates to this remote farmhouse. Ryan knows exactly what's at stake here. He speeds out to this abandoned location in the pouring rain, totally alone. He follows the sound of crying and actually manages to free a teenage girl who was chained up inside a locked room. But of course, Mark's arrogance was just lying in wait. The very second Ryan frees the girl, he hears the unmistakable click of a shotgun from the doorway. Mark is just standing there, smiling. "You always wanted to be the hero," he sneers. And then he delivers this deeply twisted justification. The truth is, people only care about monsters after bodies appear. He genuinely truly believed that his badge made him completely untouchable. But here's where Mark messed up. He completely underestimated his victim. While he's busy monologuing, the rescued girl suddenly grabs a loose metal chain off the floor and wraps it right around Mark's neck. In that split second of chaos, Ryan tackles his former partner. The shotgun blasts harmlessly up into the ceiling. It's a brutal struggle, but Ryan finally manages to handcuff Mark to the floor. Yet as the police sirens start wailing outside, Mark isn't angry. He just laughs. It's this chilling, awful laugh from a guy who knows the city inherently trusts his uniform way more than the truth. Months later, the sheer, terrifying scope of what Sullivan had been doing finally came to light. 11. That was the final count. Investigators dug through a mountain of suppressed evidence and linked him to 11 different disappearances across multiple states. He had literally used his position as a missing persons expert to run this invisible, lethal network right under the entire department's nose. But despite finally putting the killer behind bars, this case doesn't really have a neat, happy ending. Emily Carter's body was never found. The young woman who made that desperate 2:13 a.m. call, the girl who accidentally exposed a monster hiding in plain sight, remains lost to this day. Detective Cole is forever haunted by her midnight plea, always left wondering if, somewhere out there, she's still waiting to be found. This case leaves us with an incredibly unsettling reality to chew on. Some killers hide from the police, others become the police. It really forces us to take a hard look at the systems we build to protect ourselves. I mean, if the very people hunting the monsters are the monsters themselves, who do you call when you're trapped in the dark? Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer. Keep questioning everything, keep learning, and I'll catch you next time.